Let's start our afternoon session. Research Information Management System is a national initiative to modernize research information management in Latvia through the implementation of Elsevier's Pure platform. The project aims to improve the collection, management, integration, and sharing of research data across Latvian higher education and also scientific institutions. The system supports research visibility, data integration, international collaboration, and open science, while reducing the administrative load for researchers and improving access to research outputs and analytics. Sounds impressive. So therefore, we have welcome Tiago Guedes. We are eager to learn from you about Decade of Pure, challenges and best practices from Nova University Lisbon. Tiago is a head information office of University of Lisbon from Portugal. And we will give you plenty of time to introduce and inspire us. And then we will have also time for questions. So it will be also a question and answer session.
Okay,
So
thank you very much.
Is yours.
Well, I hope you can hear me. Hello, everyone. My name is Tiago Guedes. I come from Nova University in Lisbon. And I've been using CRIS systems since 2009. And specifically Pure, which is the system you are implementing at national level in Latvia. I've been the administrator at Nova since 2015. So we started quite early in terms of Europe also. But just before I start, I just want to say that I met the VPC team in 2025, just after a Pure conference in Lisbon. And let me say that I find your project extremely innovative and ambitious. I've known the European landscape of Pure for quite a few years now, and what you're doing is quite innovative at all levels in Europe, because institutions tend to go by themselves, and by doing it in a centralized framework, I think you're going the right way and the correct way, and I would also hope that Portugal would go the same way. In Portugal at the moment we are already 7 institutions with Pure, but going at it separately, and that is not the ideal way for me. What I think is the correct way, which is what you're doing here in terms of centralized. So just to give you a brief introduction, I'm going to talk from the perspective of an institution that implemented Pure in 2015. So we had a lot of hurdles, a lot of things that we had to overcome. And so I hope that the presentation can really answer some of your questions, and in the end, create a few more for you to discuss with me. So we were the first institution in Portugal to implement Pure. And basically, just to give you a brief overview of our institution, we have around 25,000 students, close to 3,000 teaching and research staff. And in terms of politics, and this is quite important, we are a very decentralized university. We have 9 academic units, which are spread out in 4 main campuses on both sides of the River Tagus in Lisbon. And this is quite important because it's more challenging. To launch a system like Pure, you need the acceptance of all units. So this is important. If you have a similar structure here in some of your universities or not, it's easier for a centralized institution to implement the system. So in terms of human resources, to give you an idea, we have 2 very focused members, which is a kind way to say understaffed team of 2 at directorate, and we work with more or less 25 staff members across the university. The core unit is around 15 people working with Pure. Those are the ones, we have 1 representative per faculty, 1 major representative, and so the core team is 15, but 25 includes also 10 members that come and go in part-time according to the flow of the system, and when the burden of work is higher, we need to bring more people. So it's around 25 people in an institution with 16,500 index publications in Scopus in the last 5 years, and we have more or less 2,900 active Pure users. Okay. So what was the initial goal? Please bear in mind that in Portugal at the time in 2015 we only had 1 university with the CRIS system, which was Porto, and they developed their own system. It's a very old system from the 90s, and so Porto is a very innovative university in Portugal, one of the 2 biggest universities, and so they developed their own system. But smaller or medium-sized institutions like ours, we are the 3rd biggest institution in Portugal, Nova, we don't have the enough development resources to develop a system. So we needed a unified research solution to provide researcher profiles to our research community. We wanted to ensure policy compliance and also open science compliance. We wanted to improve the way the deans and also the rectoral team, the rectoral and the vice rectors, would be able to obtain data from the system. And we wanted to increase the visibility of some research areas, in particularly social sciences. Social sciences was one of the main drivers for us to go for Pure, because engineering and medical research have their own ability to have impact through indexed publications in Scopus, Web of Science, but our social sciences published in Portuguese, they also wanted a way to provide and broaden their impact by using Pure. So this is just a few milestones, then I'll go briefly into detail into some of them. We come from a CRIS system, that's important to mention. In 2009, we acquired Converis, at the time from Thomson Reuters, which is the competitive of Pure. So we had Converis for 5 years, from 2009 and 2002 through to 2014. And that allowed us to have a centralized data foundation, and we've come from a serif compliant software. So we already have the data more or less arranged and prepared when we shifted to Pure. The problem is that Converis experience wasn't very good. We had several issues with the fact that Converis was developed at the time for a centralized institution. We were a very decentralized institution, so we had a lot of issues with the sharing of data between faculties. So the experience wasn't very good, and that's when I was brought into the project in 2015. I was asked by the rector to prepare the transition to a new system. At the time, we assessed the market, and we only had 3 options. To stick with Converis, which wasn't an option because we weren't very happy. To develop our own system, which also wasn't an option because we didn't have IT developers to do it. Or go into Pure. Pure was attracting a lot of attention, especially not only in Denmark, but also in the UK. They developed the REF module to the UK, so they were achieving success in the UK. We visited Edinburgh at the time to look at the system before we acquired it. And it seemed like the logical option because we had contact with the original Danish team, and it seemed a very open-minded solution, willing to cater to our needs at the time as a medium-sized institution. So we went into Pure. We decided to go for it. It took us around 6 months to 1 year to migrate the data from Converis and also to establish a successful repository integration. That was a mandatory requirement in our installation. We need to communicate with our DSpace national repository to fulfill open science. So it took us around 1 year to develop both. And then we started launching the solution across the 9 faculties. Since we are very decentralized, we had to go through a sequential launch. Each dean would decide when to launch and when to accept the program, and then we would have to provide training to a specific team at the faculty and provide open sessions like this to researchers. Okay, so this went on for around 3 years. Okay, sequentially launching, and at the end we decided that it would be a good idea to summarize everything in a policy document that had to be approved by the Dean's College. This was basically the backbone, and I'm quite fortunate that we had the idea to do it at that time, because it helped us a lot throughout the way, because a system like this is always challenging, always people questioning it. So having a good management policy approved at institutional level, involving the deans and the rector, provides the baseline to then achieve more advancements in the future. Okay. In 2019, when everything was cleaned, it took us 3 years to consolidate the software. When everything was completely clean, we decided to launch the Nova Research Portal. This was really the main driver to attract attention to the project. When researchers see their data in a public portal out there, that's when they become aware, that's when they want to interact with the system, and they become worried with their data, and so they start interacting much more. And so this was completely a defining moment to launch it into the Nova Research Portal as a public portal. Throughout 2022, the pandemic years, we had a huge spike in usage of the software because people were obviously at home. So that was a good time for us to do some policy updates. We created a dual reporting cycle because the bigger units, social sciences and science and technology, complained that the system had a lot of data to manage for a single date, a single deadline date per year. So we created two deadlines per year, one in March, another one in September, to smooth the transaction of data and the flow of data. So that was an important decision. We created SDG fingerprinting at the portal. We have an autonomous SDG fingerprinting, which I'll go into detail later on. And then in the last few years, we took the opportunity to release a new model of data sets also in Pure and started developing more interoperabilities for the data reuse, because this is really adamant. You must prove researchers that all the work that they are doing in the system has a result, and they can reuse the data for other means. Okay, so in terms of the internal cycle at Nobit, this is what we try to achieve in terms of Elsevier tools. We have Scopus as our main database of import. We also use Web of Science. We have a national subscription to Web of Science paid for at national level in Portugal. But then we use Scopus as our main database because you will find that the amount of data and metadata that you bring from Scopus is much more complete than from Web of Science or other sources. So it's important to have Scopus as connected with your Pure. In Pure, we clean the data. This is basically our cleaning tool. We consider Pure as a curating, as a tool for curating the data. And then we export everything to SciVal and are able to achieve bibliometric reports, dynamic bibliometric reports. In the past, we had a partnership, before having a CRIS system, we had a partnership with Leiden, the University of Leiden, that created our bibliometric reports every 2 years. But when we shifted to Pure, we saw an opportunity to acquire a bibliometric tool and be able to do bibliometric analysis to our deans and also to the rectoral team in a more dynamic way. Now, I think this is the most important slide perhaps for you at the moment that you are in terms of implementation. You are implementing a new system and you are starting to have questions with the databases that you're bringing in and what you should do. So I separated this in 3 phases. The pre-launch, where basically you should really curate all the databases that you bring into Pure. At the start, you have the tendency to consider that you must bring everything in, but you cannot bring in garbage. You must bring in curated data, quality data. So carefully select what you want to integrate into Pure, and I think only quality data is worth the effort. It's perhaps easier than to, when you have the system, you create an effective start date for data upload. In our case, it was 2009. We couldn't ask our researchers to upload all their legacy data from the beginning of history. We are an institution founded in 1973, so we couldn't ask them to import data from 1973. They can do it voluntarily. But in terms of our policy document, the system became mandatory from 2009 onwards. So my advice would be select an effective start date for the project. Okay? Secondly, a very important decision that you need to take is if you go with the hosting cloud versus on-site. Obviously, you have a shared VPC center, so perhaps this decision is being made at national level, but at individual level, at the beginning, we went for on-site, and that wasn't a very good decision because Pure is a very resource-intensive tool in terms of curating the database and managing the database, and we didn't have enough resources. So during the project, we had to shift to the cloud hosting, which for us, it facilitated things a lot because I can trust much more that the support from the Elsevier team is 24 hours, so it's much easier for me as administrator to have the data in cloud solution. If you have a very decentralized institution or a lot of faculties, you can consider the sequential launch across the faculties because sometimes they are not all prepared at the same time. So a sequential launch might be a possibility and cater to the reality of each faculty because faculties that have a lot of indexed publications will have a very easy time with Pure. Pure imports everything automatically from Scopus or Web of Science, and so they have no need they only have to check the quality of the data that is coming from a good quality database. But if you have a lot of social science publications, it's much more resource intensive and it needs much more work from the teams at the faculties. So take that into consideration, and take that into consideration with the time that you provide the faculties to achieve a task. Then after the system is launched, you have to establish an organizational framework and prepare the path for data reuse. I always feel that Pure is only useful if the researchers feel that they are inputting data that is not going into a silo. That data will be useful to reuse in a lot of other things. So our centralized research information management policy that I talked to you at the beginning established that framework, a simple set of rules that you can send to all faculties. Not all faculties will adapt to all rules, but there must be a backbone to the system. The types of publications, the publication types, how researchers access the system. So you must establish a good set of basic rules that seem very basic at the beginning, but they are very important to put on paper, because people will tend not to comply. Okay, so it's important to establish those rules. We have established a group of Pure specialists. That's very important. You need very proficient users at each of the faculties. So it's important to invest in training at the beginning. At the beginning, it was only myself. I trained the initial group of 9 people from the 9 faculties. Now I have a colleague with me that is in charge of training also. And so it's a constant task. You need to constantly train people. Unfortunately, people come and go, they leave the project, and so you need to train people, because those Pure specialists will have direct contact with the researchers, and they are the face of the project. Okay, so invest a lot in training and in the face that you will have of the project in each faculty. Then basically create a path to reuse the data, because we really focus on the only once concept. We want researchers to input the data only once, only in Pure, and then push the data to all the other systems. I'll show you our network of system in a minute. And also try to create a good communication with the IT staff at each of the faculties, because they will also be in charge of reusing the web services for institutional websites. That probably can be done, in your case, at central level, which is the best way to do it. But in our case, we had to work with several IT teams to reuse the data. Then after you have this backbone created, you can also start to focus on analytics and impact. When you have good quality data in the CRIS system, you can then assess the option to release it in a public portal. That will clearly drive a lot of attention to the project, but it will also be the backbone, the main tool for you to be able to tell researchers that all the work they are doing, it has an end result, an end goal. Okay, so the portal is really a fantastic tool. It's also a bit of marketing, but a fantastic tool for you to be able to push the importance of the project. Then we have a few examples at Nova of faculties that are using Pure data for evaluation assessments. This is always a critical point, because this has to be done according to the agreement of each dean. But at the moment, 2 of them are already using Pure data to use evaluation assessments internally. This is useful because they can push the metadata from Pure and then establish their own rules of assessment at each of the faculties. Also, my team is in charge of providing centralized bibliometric studies to the rectoral team. I work with not only the rector, but each of the vice rectors in producing studies for international relations, for medical research. Each of the vice rectors comes to me and asks for bibliometric studies to analyze the impact. This is really, in terms of the rectoral team and the rector, this is what they really enjoy. They don't tend to understand Pure very much. Pure is a cleaning tool, but they don't want to interact with it very much. What they want to interact with is the SciVal reports of impact, to look at international partners, to look at the impact, field-weighted citation impact. You know, it's obviously Bibliometrics must be used with care because it cannot be the only source of information to evaluate a faculty, but that's really where the interest of the rectorate lies, in the centralized bibliometric studies, okay? Also, the SDG brought some attention to the portal, also the fact that we can tag everything with each of the 17 SDGs. I'll show that in a moment. And right now we are working also with dashboards for business intelligence, and units are using the pure data to export to Power BI or other tools to visualize their data. So this is also a part that you can explore after the project is well established. So this slide really summarizes everything for us at Nova. This is really our end goal. We push information from Scopus and Web of Science into Pure. We clean all the data in Pure, including also social sciences data that does not come from Scopus or Web of Science. And then we export it automatically to our DSpace repository. We have a connector. This is really important for us, and at the moment we are using DSpace 7.6. We just recently upgraded to the version 7.6 of DSpace, and it's always a worry because we cannot break the connector, but it went quite well. At the moment, this connector works very dynamically, so every time a researcher inputs a publication into Pure, it gets validated by our librarians and pushed automatically to DSpace in the next minute. It's dynamic, okay? At the moment, when we started, it was done through a job once a day, but now we opted for doing it dynamically. So as soon as the publication is validated in Pure, it gets pushed to our national repository, which is called Run at Nova. This is completely integrated with RCAP, which is the national grid of repositories in Portugal. So all the 16 universities in Portugal are aggregated by RCAP, and then this information, as long as it has the financial ID, and if it's get funded by an European project, it's also pushed through to OpenAir. So by inputting data into Pure, you are able to fill in automatically all these three systems. Then separately, we have an institutional subscription to ORCID, and so our researchers can synchronize ORCID with Pure and then push all this data into Ciência Vita. Ciência Vita is the national project at ministry level. So our ministry in Portugal, they have a CV platform called Ciência Vita, where researchers should and must push their information on their research outputs. So it's another way to fulfill a national mandate. So we have 2 national mandates and an international platform, all connected with Pure. Okay. I'll now just push a bit into what I feel are really some of the major functionalities that you will be able to use with Pure, and especially when you launch the portal. So this is Nova Research Portal, where people can have access to, people can have access to our profiles, research units, research output, data sets, prizes, activities, and press media. Okay, at the moment, these are the modules that we are using with Pure, but Pure is very scalable. You can always release a new module when you feel you have the correct information, quality information. So this is what we feel at the moment has enough quality to be out in the public. So we have around 13,000 profiles of researchers from all our history since 1973, and we've just overcome the 100,000 benchmark of research outputs, validated research outputs, so quality data. One of the major tools that we use in Pure is the international collaborations. So what you're seeing here is our map of collaborations in the last 5 years at Nova level, top level, but this graphic is also available at faculty level, unit level, or person level. So everyone can have access to their international collaboration map. This is one of the tools that the researchers value most, and also the deans and the vice rectors, because especially when they need to travel to a country, they always ask me what kind of collaboration we have, which are the publications we have in common, and which people at Nova collaborate with that institution. And by doing that, they try to discover new networks. And when they go and travel to a country, they already know in advance if we have a strong collaboration in medicine or in social sciences, and so they can prepare better for the type of collaboration they want to achieve with that university. This is an example of individual profile. And here I can show you why researchers really enjoy the portal. The portal is really the most important tool for them. They can aggregate everything in a single page. So they synchronize their citations and H-index. This is a very, very productive researcher. It has been also our vice rector, and she was also in charge of the project. And she has also been minister in Portugal. So I always show her as an example because she's a very productive researcher. And she has a public CV here in the portal. You can contact her. You have all the links that she decided to put in Pure. She has a personal web page, a Scopus profile. She provides us with the information, all the historical affiliation she has at Nova, active affiliations. But in the system in the background, you have also access to inactive affiliations or former affiliations. But here she has all the active affiliations. And for example, if she's accepting PhD students or not, and which PhD projects she wants to highlight. This shows the graphic of our productivity throughout time. And as you can see, she has the same modules that we released at top level at individual level. When you go into a publication, you have the integration of all the citations from Scopus. You have the abstract, the links, the DOIs, and the integration of altmetrics. Okay? This has been also very useful because researchers find it interesting that they can follow the news outlets, the policy sources that cited their document. This is all integrated with altmetrics. And for example, this was a publication that had a lot of views in terms of World Scientists Warning to Humanity, a second notice for climate change. And so this basically exploded in terms of views and interest from the community. And so this is something the researchers, when everything is integrated, they can then quickly link this if they need to provide this information to anyone. Regarding fingerprinting tools, this is an example of a fingerprinting done to a specific person. In this case, this is the fingerprinting of Professor Elvira that I showed you. She researches it in film, thin films, oxide, compound, etc. So her area is material science. So this easily facilitates the ability to link any of these fingerprints, and she can discover within the portal if any other person from Nova also researches in this area. And so she's able to not only go at a top level, but also into a sub and deeper level of discovering research interests and other people researching in our area. If you turn on the portal, there's also an ability to search this at European level with all other institutions that from Elsevier that also use the portal. It might be interesting, but this is done at one individual researcher level or also at institutional level. Then this is the example that I mentioned earlier of the development goals, the UN development goals. Everything is clickable in the portal, so there is a total for each SDG, and you can go deeper and deeper, find which SDG, which publications, which people. So you can explore within the portal, and this tagging is made automatically. We did some studies with the quality of the data. We turned on first the option just for manual selection, and then we compared the manual selection with the automatic tool from Elsevier, and we found around 93% similarity. So what researchers were selecting manually is exactly what the tool is doing automatically. Also very important, the researcher is able to delete something that the system provided automatically and override it and choose the SDG he finds more useful. Also a very interesting tool is the network tool. As soon as you have the data into Pure, you can visualize your collaboration tool. It even gives you the show counts online, so she understands that she has 50 publications shared with another researcher, and you can see in black the internal researchers, in white the external researchers from other institutions in Portugal or otherwise. And so she can discover or see how our collaboration is going, and you can create, for example, in this case, it's just 3 years with a minimum of 3 collaborations to be able to visualize everything. This has been quite useful, and when I show this in sessions with researchers, it's one of the tools they most highlight, because when you have long careers, sometimes you lose track of all the collaborations, and this is a way that you can visualize it. Now, I left this slide more to the end, because first I showed you the positives of the system. Now I must also show you the difficult parts of the system. And these are the ongoing challenges, the things that you can overcome, but they give a lot of work, a lot of challenge, and you need to be constantly aware that you need to take attention to these 3 points. The first one is really IDs. A system like Pure only works with good quality IDs. Scopus ID, Web of Science ID, ORCID, all the identifiers you can possibly update into the system, do it. When you're building the database at the beginning and you're now precisely going through that phase, import the most IDs as you can, because that will facilitate the import of data, and the quality of the data imported into the system will be much higher. Okay? So in our case, ORCID is mandatory at national level, so we have all the ORCIDs from all the researchers. We also have Scopus IDs and Web of Science IDs, and in the case of social sciences, we try to overcome this with DOIs. We also have, at the Research Information Office that I manage, we also have a DOI service where we provide a minting system using DataCite to especially the social science researchers that don't have indexation in Scopus and Web of Science. And this is quite important. If you have IDs in the system, you will clearly achieve a very high quality of data in the end run. The second point is the master data module. And this, I feel, is the most difficult module. And when I go to Elsevier and Pure conferences, this is the #1 complaint of all customers. It's really the problem of external entities in the system. With internal entities, you create your own database structure. You have your tree, organizational tree. You have all the people very well curated that you can control. But when you bring publications from Scopus and Web of Science and other sources, you are also bringing a lot of external collaborations. And these external collaborations are not very well curated in databases, especially organizations. As you know, unfortunately, we don't have a single source of information like ORCID for researchers. We have several projects like ROAR, etc., that try to achieve identifiers for organizations, but there are still not a single source. So the problem is really when you bring external collaborators, you bring a lot of publications and a lot of information from organizations that aren't very well curated, and so you need to keep to constantly clean data. And this is really, we hoped with AI, that AI could be brought into Pure and help us with this module. In the latest conference in 2025, that this is really one of the pushes that a lot of customers are going for, is to try to convince Elsevier that we need to really improve the way organizations are organized in Pure. Because a lot of the work from your teams in managing data will go into the master data module. Okay? This is really one of the warnings that I want to give. And finally, the organizations. I would go for this option. We needed to avoid the sub-level in terms of organizations. We really try to aggregate everything at the top-level institutional name, because when you are pushing from Scopus or from Web of Science, you get the department of this, department of that, and that creates a huge bulk of information that creates duplicates, and the information doesn't get very well stored in the system. So when we bring information into the system, we aggregate at the top level, because we found that when you look at the map, you really are interested in knowing how many collaborations you have with a country and how many you have with the top institution, with a certain university. You don't want to know how many you have with each department. That you can go into detail by exporting the data to Excel, for example. But to know in the map how many collaborations you have, first with Latvia and then with a certain university in Latvia. That's what I want to know. I don't want to know the departments within the university. So try to aggregate everything at the top level. But this is something you can easily achieve. If you make this decision at the beginning, then when you start importing data, you aggregate everything. So basically what I'm trying to show here is that there is a very useful side to the system in terms of broadening the impact of your research. It's a very useful tool in terms of analytics and also reusing data to other systems. But there is a burden of managing all these 3 topics: the identifiers, the persons, and the organizations. It's very important to invest in this, because this will provide the quality to the system. And at the moment that we are now with AI as the buzzword, everyone is talking about AI and using AI, it's important to understand that the quality of data and to achieve reliable information, you have to clean the data and curated in a CRIS system. That's the only way you will have access to very good results using AI, for example. Okay, so this is really adamant, and for me, the most important part of the project. So I prepared more or less 35 minutes of presentation because I hoped that you have a lot of questions regarding the system. So I'm all ears.
Do we have questions? Yes, there is one. I also have one. Do you have a mic there?
It's okay. Thank you for the talk. It was nice to hear more about Pure. It's not a system that I use and interact with very much, but I wanted to know if you've collected feedback from researchers from the researchers that you're supporting who are using Pure and what they think about the system and any limitations that they may not like or.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a very, I always provide more or less the same answer. When you look at the research community at Nova, I would break down the community in like 30% of our users are younger researchers that are very willing to interact with the system. They want to interact, they maintain it on a daily basis. Okay? Then you have like around, I would say 40% of users that only interact with the system in the 2 weeks before the deadline. Okay? They receive the email from their dean, they remember about the system, they go into the system. Okay? Those are the ones that, unfortunately, are the bulk of the users. We try to convince more and more and more users by providing quality data that they need to interact on a daily basis to smoothen the process. But unfortunately, it's an ongoing process. And I didn't mention in the presentation, but our policy document is mandatory, but there is no real compliance penalty. Okay, so it's just a carrot. It's not a stick. Okay, and so it's important to be diplomatic with the researchers, and it's an ongoing process. Okay, so these are 70% of the users. Then you have 30%. Which are the naysayers, the people that hate the system. Whichever system you would develop, they wouldn't want to use it. They feel that they are researchers, they don't want to interact with the system, or they ask their secretary to interact with the system. More senior researcher level. Okay? When we ask them about the system, I think they always tend to focus more on the portal. They like the portal, and they like the fact that they can reuse the data. In terms of the system itself, if it could be easier and more, for example, when importing, they need to look at the import they're doing and look at the quality of what they're doing. And as more steps are added, they always complain. Okay? And as soon as you go to younger researchers, we find the opposite. They want to interact more, and they don't mind about the digital steps. So I think it's really a generational thing here.
Could you elaborate a bit more about implementation of data sets? Because what kind of repositories are connected for automatic harvesting of the data sets? Or probably you are doing it completely manually? Because the figure I saw, I think you have something like 197 data sets right now. So we are not actually that much behind you in that sense. So.
No. Yeah, it's not a lot because we launched it very recently, and it's not part of the mandatory policy document. Okay, in the document we have the mandatory side is only research outputs. People are mandatory to input all their research outputs. The data sets is something that we launched in early stage, more or less, and people are voluntarily using it. So we don't have all the bulk of information in data sets. But to answer to your question, we use automatic imports from Scopus and Web of Science, okay? And we export automatically to DSpace and ORCID. Those are the main 4 integrations that we have, okay? All the other integrations that we could develop, we always try to facilitate the DOI, for example, for social sciences, but there is still a lot of manual input done, especially in the Faculty of Social Sciences and in the Faculty of Law. Those are the main 2 that still manually upload a lot of data into Pure. But all the other institutions use mainly Scopus, Web of Science, and they export everything automatically to DSpace. The dataset module that we are using, we are trying to provide not the actual hosting of the datasets, we provide connectors with Zenodo. At national level, in Portugal, Zenodo is the main dataset database from the European Commission that is being suggested to our researchers. But this is still early stages. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tiago. Can you please give us more details about that dual reporting cycle? Is it split by faculties or how does it work?
Yeah, we only had one reporting deadline at the beginning, which was April. April of every year, all the faculties had to input all the information from the previous year into Pure. This was easy to achieve in 7 of the 9 faculties, but in two of the biggest faculties, social science and science and technology, they complained that this created a lot of hurdles because researchers would come to the system in February or late February and so create a huge amount of data to validate up until April. So we decided to divide in two deadlines, one in March, where you validate the second semester of the previous year, and one in September, where you validate the first semester of each year. And this helped a lot the 2 biggest faculties. It smoothens the process very well, and researchers don't feel as much stressed with one single deadline. But this was basically for the editors and for the validation team, which complained a lot, and it helped us go over a few of the major complaints that we had in terms of managing the system.
Hi, you mentioned that you have imports from Scopus and Web of Science. I'm just curious, if Web of Science is like a separate service to import and you need to pay additionally, right?
Yeah.
And Scopus is like, comes with the package, right?
Yeah, well, Portugal is, in my view, one of the hardest countries to release Pure. and I'll tell you why. Because we have a community that is very much connected with Web of Science data, historically, and also with open source solutions, and also very much against Elsevier. Okay, so the hardest country to implement Pure is really Portugal. So we have a national subscription to Web of Science, which is paid by our ministry, but Scopus subscriptions are paid individually by each institution that releases Pure. When you launch Pure, you really need Scopus because the connection is so good in terms of the amount of metadata that you really want that. But we also wanted to cater politically to the fact that we must be compliant also with Web of Science imports. Okay, so at the moment, people at all the 9 faculties can import from Scopus and can import from Web of Science. Okay.
Any other question?
You told at the beginning that you use Pure to clear your data. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what for you use it the most? Is it like research outputs or data sets, or for what?
Yeah, it's really more research outputs because that's the mandatory side of the project at Nova. So when I said we use Pure to clean data, is that we want to involve the faculties and the deans, and we want to politically state that, well, you're involved in the curation of your data, and all the bibliometric studies to assess impacts and to evaluate the faculties will use the data that you personally validated. Okay, this is very important for us politically. So when they go into Pure, they have the ability not only to accept whatever comes from Scopus and Web of Science, because a lot of the times, and especially in the past, we had a lot of affiliation errors in Scopus and Web of Science. And so Pure is an intermediate step that allows them to clean everything that comes dirty from external databases, guarantee that all the affiliations, all the researchers are very well curated, and when we export that data centrally for research assessment or for SciVal, for bibliometric studies, it's the clean data that each faculty authorized. Okay? So it's really a curation tool, but also a political tool that allow us to state that we use data that is curated by the faculties. Okay? This seems simple, but it's quite important for us because especially at the beginning in 2015, for example, in Scopus, Nova has a very difficult name, Nova University Lisbon. Then we have the University of Lisbon. So you have two universities in Lisbon. And this creates a mayhem of affiliations and affiliation errors. And so we used Pure a lot to detect the errors, clean them directly in Scopus, because you not only clean the data for your own use, you clean Scopus directly at researcher level. And as you know, for example, for rankings, I'm also in charge of managing rankings at the institution since 2009. And rankings at the moment, QS and Times Higher Education, for example, they use mainly Scopus data. So when you clean data in Pure and you detect the errors, you can clean affiliations in the databases, and that also cleans the data that ranking institutions are using. Even though rankings, as we know, aren't very scientific tools, but we have to live with them. So we use also Pure to detect the errors in our affiliation data.
Thank you. You mentioned that Nova is destructured, like very fragmented.
Decentralized, yeah.
Yeah, decentralized, that's the word. So you mentioned that a lot of training you had to do for the deans. So it is 10 years. It must have been a lot of learnings for the training process. So maybe you have some advice, like you use any tool, or what was the biggest, like to make them the faces of the product?
Yeah, well, I always follow the first advice I was given by James Toon in Edinburgh, the first person I met from the Pure community in the UK. And he always told me that, well, you can provide training to your editors, your power users, but you must leave your desk and walk around the university and speak directly with the researchers. So that would be my first advice. You have to invest a lot in the power users, but especially in the first 4 to 5 years of the project, you need to go and do open sessions to researchers, because you cannot rely only on a single person for a social sciences crowd. You will have a lot of questions, you will have a lot of complaints, and people value the fact that you are there in the stage answering the complaints. Okay? If you outsource everything to your colleagues and they receive the bulk of the complaints or the issues, that's not the best option. I would advise you to get out, go and talk with people, and try to solve the complexities of the system directly with people. So throughout the 10 years, I really resorted in the first 5 years to open sessions. Okay? Now the system is very well established, and especially after the pandemic, we don't do as much open sessions. We now tend to focus a lot on training new people that come into the project, and that unfortunately there's a lot of rotation. For example, I can give you an example. Our faculty of law in a single year had 3 rotations, and we had to train people because unfortunately they were using PhD students, and so it was complicated. Now finally we have a structured team at the Faculty of Law, and it's a single person, and it's working very well. But be prepared to invest a lot in training, because people will shift and go, and so you need power users, but also direct contact with the researchers. If you fail to contact and to feel what the community think about the system, I think the system is doomed, because you really need to understand what the individual researcher thinks about the project. The other point that I need to stress is really having the rectors and the vice rectors on board. And this is not always possible because of political shifts. Sometimes you have a vice rector that is very pro-system, that helps you a lot during those 4 years, and the system advances massively. And then sometimes you have a vice rector that is not as willing towards the system. And that is something that must be realistic, that has a huge impact in the system. Having someone, for example, from an area that isn't very well successful in the system in terms of impact, is something that I always feel. If it's in a star area at the university, people are more willing. So unfortunately, all these human factors come into mind, and be prepared for shifts and downturns, and always be prepared for those shifts throughout the implementation of the system. Okay.
Thank you so much, Tiago. Any other questions, or yeah, Astra, sure.
Thank you for your experience. I was wondering from the researcher's perspective, you mentioned that you push the data from the Scopus database. So what are the actual tasks that researcher has to do in the Pure system? Just to check the records, or is there something else? And what is the, I don't know, average workload for a researcher?
Okay, so that was also a defining moment at the beginning. We could have gone for the decision that researchers don't need to interact with the system, okay? And that is a valid option. A lot of institutions, some institutions do it. But we felt that that wasn't the best option because no one better than the researcher to know about their research, okay? If you do not allow researchers to have their own profile to update, even though that will create issues and hurdles and people don't want to have that task, but it's important to convince them to have a look at their data before it gets validated in the system. So the amount of work they have is simply, we turn on automatically all the IDs. This the editor can do himself. He releases the profile to the researcher, and then he gets automatically pop-ups about new publications in Scopus. He just has to check, see if they're okay, and import. That information doesn't get automatically validated. That goes into an intermediate step called for validation. Okay? And then each of the editors at the schools receive the for validation data, validate all the metadata, guarantee that it has, if it's, for example, a publication with an open access publication that needs to go to the repository, guarantee that the version is correct, and it's pushed as validated. Basically, one single person at the faculty, or two or three, it depends on the size of the team. I would say that the bulk of the work goes to the editor team. The researcher only needs to interact, for example, a very productive researcher would have publications on that level as Professor Alvira I showed, but that's not the case for everyone. So I would say a researcher, by accessing the system once or twice per month, he can basically see if everything is going on well, push the data for validation, and wait for the editorial team to put the final validation on the publication. But it's also it's always sensitive because some researchers feel that they shouldn't interact with any system. Okay, those are the most difficult ones. But when they see that they can reuse the data, that the portal can be used as an aggregate tool for them to broaden the impact of their research, when they see they can fulfill open access automatically if they upload their information, I think we slowly acquire more people attract to the system, they are convinced with the system. And even though we have those cycles with most pro vice rector, not so pro vice rector, throughout those cycles in 10 years, the system has survived. So I think if you create a baseline, a good structure, and if you provide good information and data reuse, people will be convinced. But it takes time.
Thank you so much, Tiago. 10 years of journey.
Yeah.
They're lucky to have you.
I hope this was a realistic presentation, not a...
Yeah.
I think it was... you have a very innovative project, and I wish you the best. There are some hurdles, but you are doing it the right way. I think we did it the hard way. Okay.
It's very practical. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Also to another big implementation. Next is our guest who had a key role developing Swiss Library Service platform. Please welcome Executive Director Andreas Kirstein. In his keynote, he will present Swiss Library Service platform as a living example of how national library infrastructure can evolve to meet the demands of a rapidly changing information landscape. Shared platform today connects hundreds of libraries and provides seamless access to scientific information across Switzerland. Welcome, Andrea. Stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. And as you heard, I come from Switzerland, and I guess maybe there are also interesting other topics to bring from Switzerland, maybe something about ice hockey. So I congratulate the first of the big win against Germany, and I'm sorry a little bit for the loss against Switzerland team in last week. So now come to the keynote, and let me start with a remark. Research from Wiley indicates that around 80% of researchers start their searches using generic AI tools, even when institutions and employers license high-quality discovery platforms and full-text resources. This is not just an interesting fact to open a keynote. It shows us that the way people search for, evaluate, and use knowledge is changing fundamentally, and faster than many of our institutional systems were designed for. And this raises essential questions for libraries, universities, and information infrastructures. If users increasingly start their search for knowledge outside our systems, how do we make sure that reliable, high quality, and well-contextualized information remains visible, accessible, and trusted? This is the question I would like to explore with you today through the example of SLSP, the Swiss Library Service Platform. The title of this slide is The Challenge, but in reality, it's not just one challenge. It's a combination of many developments happening at the same time. Information is becoming more abundant, but not necessarily easier to access. Digital services are becoming more powerful, but also more fragmented. AI tools are becoming more accessible, but they do not always make clear where their answers come from or whether the underlying information is reliable, current, and appropriately contextualized. At the same time, users expect simplicity. They expect one entry point, immediate access, intuitive services, and reliable results. And they increasingly compare library services, not with other libraries, but with the seamless digital experiences they encounter every day elsewhere. For libraries and universities, this creates a difficult task. We need to preserve quality, trust, and context, while also meeting completely new expectations around speed, usability, and digital access. At the same time, we must avoid becoming dependent on infrastructures and technologies that we cannot sufficiently shape or govern ourselves. That is why national library infrastructures matter. They are not just technical systems. They are part of the knowledge infrastructure of a country and create the condition under which knowledge can remain discoverable, verifiable, interoperable, and sustainably accessible for people and increasingly also for machines. When we look at the challenges more closely, we see, in my opinion, 5 major developments. First, information ecosystems are becoming more fragmented. Scientific information is distributed across many systems, platforms, publishers, and repositories. Second, users expect seamless and immediate access. They do not want to understand institutional boundaries before they find a book, an article, or a dataset. Third, AI changes how knowledge is searched, selected, and trusted. Many users, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, no longer search only by entering keywords into a catalog. They ask questions and expect answers. This changes the role of discovery systems from places where users search to infrastructures that must provide trustworthy, machine-readable, and interoperable knowledge. Fourth, libraries have to balance local needs with shared infrastructure. Every institution has its own history, its own users, and its own priorities. But many of the challenges are shared. And fifth, trust, reliability, and provenance are becoming strategic questions in a world of generated answers. Libraries have a crucial role to play to make knowledge traceable, verifiable, and accessible. In other words, libraries are not only managing collections, they are helping to organize trust in the scientific information space. So what is SLSP? SLSP is a service provider for libraries in Switzerland. Together with our partner libraries, we operate Swisscovery. That's the national library platform for academic information in Switzerland. Our goal is simple to formulate, but complex to deliver. We want to give the Swiss scientific community access to the information it needs at the right time, in high quality, and across institutional boundaries. Today, Swisscovery brings together the holdings and services of more than 500 libraries across Switzerland. For users, this means easier access. For libraries, it means shared infrastructure, shared standards, and shared development. The Swiss response did not begin with a grand national master plan. It began with a very practical problem. Several academic library networks in Switzerland knew that their existing systems would have to be replaced because they come to an end. This could have led every institution or every regional network to solve the problem separately. But a group of institutions asked a different question. If we all face the same system change, why not use this moment to build something shared? That was the beginning of SLSP. It was a technical challenge, yes, but from the beginning, it was also an organizational and cultural challenge. And in Switzerland, that is not self-evident. Switzerland is a small country, that's true, but it's highly federalist, multilingual, and institutionally diverse. National solutions are never automatic in Switzerland. They require trust, negotiation, and commitment. In that sense, SLSP is also an exercise in coordinated autonomy, creating common infrastructure while respecting institutional diversity. This timeline shows the main steps. In 2015, 15 institutions joined forces and started the project in a sense that I mentioned before. In 2017, SLSP was founded as an organization in the form of a public limited company, like a private company, but owned by the universities itself. In December 2020, Swisscovery went live in the middle of the pandemic situation. And today, in 2026, more than 500 libraries are connected to the platform. What is important here is not the timeline by itself. What is important is the transformation behind this timeline. The project started as a response to system change, but over time it became something more, a shared infrastructure for academic information in Switzerland. This marks a shift from system replacement to strategic infrastructure, from we need a new system to we need a common foundation for future knowledge access. And this shift matters because the next challenges, AI, open science, data quality, interoperability, and digital autonomy, cannot be solved by isolated institutions alone. Today, Swisscovery connects more than 500 libraries, and around 800,000 patrons use Swisscovery on a daily level. The platform contains around 30 million bibliographic records from the libraries, and approximately 2,500 librarians work with Swisscovery on their daily work. This number shows the scale of the platform, but numbers alone do not explain what it makes meaningful. The real value lies in the fact that these institutions are no longer operating only next to each other. They are connected to a shared infrastructure. For users, this means easier discovery and access. For libraries, it means shared workflows, common standards, and new possibilities for cooperation. For Switzerland as a research landscape, it also creates greater visibility and coherence across institutions and language regions. SLSP today is more than the operator of a system. We provide services that support libraries in their daily work and help them focus on what matters most, their users. This includes access to the platform, but also support, training, coordination, data services, development projects, and the continuous improvement of shared workflows. In other words, SLSP is not only about technology. It's about creating capabilities that individual institutions would struggle to build alone. Data competence, innovation capacity, shared standards, reliable partnerships, and collective learning is now a common project. Shared systems, services, standards, and learning. This is an important point. When people hear the word platform, they often think first about software. Of course, technology is essential. Without reliable systems, none of this would work. But a platform, in our sense, is more than technology. Shared systems make cooperation possible. Shared services create efficiency. Shared standards enable consistency and quality. And shared learnings helps the whole community adapt. For us, this was one of the key lessons. Infrastructure is not only built with technology, it's built with relationships, processes, and shared responsibility. And in times of AI and rapid technological change, shared learning becomes a strategic asset. It allows institutions to test, understand, and shape change together instead of reacting alone. This leads me to the question, how does SLSP actually work? The short answer is through governance, shared responsibility, community dialogue, and co-creation. A national platform cannot simply be managed from the center. It needs clear structures, but it also needs participation. Libraries need to see that their expertise matters. Institutions need to understand how decisions are made. And the platform needs mechanisms that allow it to develop without losing legitimacy. This is why governance is not a side topic. In fact, governance is part of the infrastructure itself and defines how trust, priorities, and responsibility are organized. Our governance structure is designed to connect different levels. There is the institutional level, where strategic questions and institutional responsibilities are discussed. And there is the functional or professional level, where library expertise comes into the process. And there is a library council which acts as an overarching participatory body for all the libraries. And there are expert groups that contribute specialized knowledge in areas such as fulfillment, e-resources, metadata, and discovery. This structure is not always simple, and it also doesn't look simple. But it reflects an important principle. Shared infrastructure needs shared ownership. At the same time, governance also requires balance. Expertise is essential, yes, but expertise alone cannot replace strategic decision-making. The challenge is to bring professional knowledge institutional responsibility, and strategic direction together. This governance model helps us keep dialogue open. For example, the SLSP forum on the right side creates a space for exchange between library directors, the SLSP management, and the Library Council. The expert groups help us include operational and professional perspectives. And the Library Council discusses shared rules, shared standards, service quality, and priorities to the development of the network. So the purpose of governance is not simply to administer the platform. Governance is how shared ownership becomes possible. It creates the conditions under which institutions can trust the platform and each other. But governance does not make things easy by itself. It creates legitimacy, yes, but it also requires time, clarity, and often discipline. The more institutions are involved, the more important it becomes to define where consultation is needed, where expertise is needed, and where, at the end, decisions have to be taken. That is part of the reality of shared infrastructure. So let me talk a little bit about the obstacles along our way. It is easy to present a national platform as a success story. And yes, SLSP is something we are proud of. But building shared infrastructure is not a smooth or purely technical process. It involves organizational change, changing habits, new roles, new dependencies, and sometimes very difficult discussions. The truth about change is that it doesn't happen simply because the strategy is right or the technology is available. No, it happens when people and institutions are willing to move together. So what was hard for us? Several things were difficult. First, we had to align many institutions with different histories, needs, and expectations. Second, we have to find the right balance between local autonomy and national standards. This is never easy, because standardization creates value for the network, but it can also feel like a loss of flexibility for individual institutions. Third, trust had to be built after a major system change. System migrations are intense experiences. They create pressure, uncertainty, and sometimes a lot of frustration. Fourth, we had to keep momentum while managing change fatigue. And finally, perhaps the deepest transformation was cultural, moving from my system in my library to our infrastructure. That shift takes time. It cannot simply be decided. It has to be built through practice and requires institutions to see cooperation not as a limitation of autonomy, but as a way to strengthen collective capacity. So what comes next? At the beginning, I spoke about the challenges we are facing today: fragmentation, AI, trust, scale, and changing expectations. So the question is, how do we respond now? For SLSP, the answer is not simply to add more technology. The answer is to develop our infrastructure in a way that keeps academic information still accessible, reliable, and usable, also in a rapidly changing digital environment. That is the core idea behind our new strategy. It translates the experience of buildings discovery into the next phase, from shared operations to shared strategic capacity. So our strategy is not mainly about new technology. It's about ensuring that academic information remains accessible, reliable, and usable in this changing environment. By 2030, our ambition is for SLSP to be the platform for academic information in Switzerland. Physical and digital, user-oriented, data and AI-driven, interoperable and open. This means we want to support the transformation of the library system into a simple, reliable and sustainable way to access information. It also means combining algorithmically supported services with professional expertise and curation, so that speed does not replace quality, context or judgment. And again, we cannot do this alone. We need collaboration with libraries, universities, partners, and the wider academic information ecosystem. We focus in this way on 6 areas. First, we want to optimize and refine all the services for the academic libraries based on user needs. Second, we want to promote innovation in a more structured way, especially around AI and in service development. Third, we want to develop partnerships more strategically across the academic information ecosystems, and we began with it. Fourth, we want to strengthen digital autonomy and data competence, also from our libraries. Fifth, we want to think about the future organization of physical collections in a time where price for physical collections are still high, but the usage are lower than ever before. And sixth, we want to embed sustainability into our daily work. These areas show that the future of library infrastructure is not only about discovery systems. It's about the whole environment in which knowledge is produced, described, accessed, used, and preserved. What is important is that these areas cannot be treated separately. Questions around AI, interoperability, sustainability, data competence, and collaboration increasingly influence one another. Sustainability, in particular, is not a separate topic because it has to shape how we develop services, organize infrastructure, and make strategic decisions across all areas. For example, also which system provider we choose. What this means in practice? It means developing service in a user-oriented way that is also shaped from the end users and not only from the library's perspective, and continuously evolving this way. We are working now systematically with user needs, testing ideas earlier and turning innovation into a continuous process rather than isolated projects. It also means developing AI-supported services in a responsible and transparent way. For example, we are exploring applications for metadata management, discovery, user support, and internal workflows as well. But these services must remain connected to verified knowledge bases and professional expertise. AI should, in our sense, support trusted academic infrastructures, not replace them. Another important area is, I think for all countries, especially European countries and Switzerland, is digital autonomy and shared data competence. This means helping libraries and universities better understand the infrastructures they depend on, strengthening data competences, and enabling informed decisions around technological dependencies, interoperability, and data governance. At the same time, SLSP is working towards more open and interoperable infrastructures, so that information can move across the systems, as we saw it in a good example in the presentation before. And services can flow without losing quality, context, or trust. It also means developing more sustainable approaches to physical and digital collections. Digital transformation does not eliminate physical collections, but it changes how storage, logistics, and long-term access can be organized collaboratively and sustainably. And finally, it means strengthening partnerships and shared innovation capacity across institutional boundaries. No single library, university, or service provider can address these challenges alone. Shared infrastructure increasingly depends on shared learning, shared standards, and strategic cooperation. This is where we see SLSP's long-term role, not as a single tool or system, but as a connecting infrastructure that helps organize, support, and strengthen the academic information ecosystem in Switzerland. If we succeed, SLSP will increasingly become part of the trusted foundation on which libraries, universities, and users can build for the discovery, the access, cooperation, and also for the future development of academic information services. So SLSP is not simply a Swiss success story. The challenges we face in Switzerland are familiar to many countries and institutions. Many of you are probably dealing with similar questions. How do we collaborate across institutional boundaries? How do we preserve trust in a changing information environment? How do we build infrastructure that is stable enough to be reliable but flexible enough to adapt? So the real question is not, should every country copy the Swiss model? Of course not. The real question is how we can create forms of collaboration that preserve trust, legitimacy, and local relevance, while still allowing us to act together. Because in the age of AI and platform dominance, the ability to cooperate is itself a form of strategy strength. So let me end with 6 lessons from our journey. First, shared systems need shared ownership. If instructions do not feel part of the infrastructure, if institutions do not feel part of the infrastructure will remain fragile. Second, governance must enable dialogue, not just decisions. Decisions are necessary, but dialogue is what creates legitimacy. Third, standardization only works when trust is built. Without trust, standards are perceived as restrictions. With trust, they become enablers. Fourth, innovation needs stable foundations. You cannot build the future on unstable infrastructure. Fifth, national infrastructure is a long-term commitment. It does not end with a go-live date. And sixth, maybe the most important in my view, patience is key. Transformation takes longer than we expect. But if it's built collectively, it can also become much stronger than we imagined. Shared infrastructure is never truly finished. It is an ongoing process of coordinating, learning, and adaptation. So thank you very much for your attentions, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Impressive work you have done. Yeah, we need success stories for institutional cooperation. So I hope we can take the learnings. And you did some practical opinions on how to manage that. So do we have questions from the audience? Because you will also stay in the networking pause in coffee break. We will have
Absolutely, I will.
Great. So what do you mean by that patience is the key, but it can become even stronger in the end? It was a surprise for me that is a private institution developed by the universities.
Yeah.
So how did you come to that
It was a kind of pragmatic decision in Switzerland because there is a good heuristic form for a private company that helps with flexibility, and by the ownership, by the shareholders. We have now 21 shareholders, and they are all universities or bigger foundations. So, for example, the National Library of Switzerland is also a shareholder of my company, even it's not part of the system yet. And so we have a little bit the advantages from both sides. We have a legal form that allows us more flexibility when it's come to agile development and to go faster than normally libraries will do. And on the other side, we are really backed by institutional shareholders. They are really part of the game, and so they feel also responsible for the wealth of this company. So it's something in between public and private.
Sounds like a smart model, yeah. And so, we don't, yeah, there is a question. Can you please come here? I don't think we, you can bring. Yep.
Thank you. I had a question because we talked a little bit in the break, during the break, and you said the biggest challenges are often not negotiations to the outside partners, but among the shareholders. And maybe do you have some lessons learned that work best for how to talk with the shareholders to come to a consensus on how to move forward? And the example that's important to us right now is the negotiation with publishers. And yes, how to come to
please let me add some words about the purchasing consortia for purchasing the electronic material in Switzerland. The office of this consortia is also part of my company, but they have another governance. And really the game changer, to be honest, in Switzerland about the success of purchasing these big deals on a national level was to take it away in a certain sense, to take it away from the libraries and give it to an association called Swiss Universities. This is the association of all Swiss universities. And they had a governance level where the presidents, the rectors, vice rectors from the universities been in the leading position to negotiate this. And the other question is, it means not this, I think this is an ongoing task because there's a tension. Library is a part of the institution. And even if the institution are sometimes maybe even not satisfied with the services of the libraries, they say this is our library. But on the other hand, now we have a lot of common challenges where all libraries face it, and we have to do it together. So some of my activities is seen from the universities as a break of their own autonomy. And we always try to find out, to check out in discussions, how far we want to go. Even a national library strategy can be an attack on the university's autonomy, because that means it has to follow for their own libraries rules and strategic directions that they not have by themselves under control. This is typical also when you have a consortia for purchasing. At the end, it helps all, but not in the same time. Some smaller institutions have even maybe from some deals to pay more than otherwise than they've been single. So it's also a discussion about solidarity in this academic sector in Switzerland. So I would say we didn't find a solution, but I think we implement some mechanisms and some structure to keep these discussions ongoing, but also comes to decisions.
Thank you so much once again, Andreas. That was impressive. So, thank you. Thank you. Let me give schedule what we are doing next, so how the day looks further. We will have a coffee break now for about 30 minutes, and networking, of course. So please also have the chance to ask our keynote speakers in more private atmosphere your questions. And then we again go after half an hour to parallel sessions in the rooms. So one is here and the others you already know. And then to finish the working day, we will have panel discussion with local partners, local stakeholders, shared responsibility, shared infrastructure. Is that possible? How is that possible? How we do that? It will be held in Latvian. So after parallel sessions, please come back to the main stage here for the panel discussion. So this is how it looks like. And yes, so now we have coffee and a networking break. Thank you.